Namah Shivaya, Om 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 Namah Shivaya.
So welcome to one and all to New Light Temple's March service on renewal and growth. I'm Reverend Dr. Bud James, and I'll be hosting tonight's service. Here's our agenda for tonight. We'll be opening with our invocation. We'll look at our seasonal observations for this month. We've got a wonderful guest speaker tonight, Reverend Don Kunze, and he's going to be sharing his insights on our topic by discussing his walking the Camino, our universal blessing, and our experiential sharing segment, where we'll give everyone the opportunity who wishes to share to speak about tonight's theme and the observation. We'll do our quick announcements and wrap it up. So first of all, I would like to invite Reverend Angela to come forward and share tonight's invocation. Reverend AJ.
Greetings, everyone. New Light Temple was founded by Rabbi Joseph Gelberman, where as a haven where people of all beliefs and backgrounds could joyously come together to share their bountiful and varied gifts of spirit. New Light Temple is the ordaining body for All Faith Seminary International. Our purpose is to provide a sacred space for people of all faiths and ages to celebrate diverse religious and spiritual traditions. We gather for connection, inspiration, solace, and healing while
fostering understanding, peace, love,
and unity.
There you go.
Amen. In the words of Gandhi, I offer you peace, I offer you love, I offer you friendship, I see your beauty, I hear your need, I feel your feelings, my wisdom flows from the highest source. I salute this source in you. Let us work together for unity and peace. In the words of Rabbi Gelberman, never instead of, always in addition to. Amen. Ashe and shalom.
Thank you, Reverend AJ. So we'll take a look at this month's holy and important observations. There's a lot because it is springtime and lots of different people share spring in lots of different ways. At the beginning of the month, Mahashivratri, a Hindu festival called Shiva's Night, honoring Lord Shiva for overcoming darkness and ignorance. Also on March 1st, Laialat al Miraj, a Muslim holiday commemorating Muhammad's journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, where he ascended into heaven. On the 8th was Holi, one of the most popular Hindu festivals that celebrate colors, welcome spring, and the eternal love of Lord Radha Krishna. From the 8th through the 10th was Hola Mohalla, which is a Sikh celebration honoring spirituality and valor to protect and celebrate and defend the human rights of all people, irrespective of their beliefs, nationality, gender, socioeconomic status, and caste status, such as in India. On the 17th was Purim, the Feast of Lots in the Jewish faith, that honors the survival of ancient Persian Jews who were marked by death by a very, very wicked man. On the 19th was the feast day of Saint Joseph, a day that commemorates the husband of Jesus's mother Mary and the surrogate father on earth. just the other day, the 20th, Ostara, the celebration of the spring equinox in the pagan and Wiccan religions. The spring equinox is a time when, interestingly, day and night are equal. So it's a time when both light and darkness are brought into harmony, and light once again rules the earth. So traditional color to wear is white, or in our case tonight, a flavor of blue. The name Easter, by the way, is derived from Estore or Estar or Ostara, which all refer to the name of the goddess of spring who was honored at the time of the vernal equinox. On the 21st was Naw Ruz. The Zoroastrians celebrate their new year on the spring equinox. It's also the new year for the Baha'i faith, where work and school must be suspended, and is typically honored with a celebratory dinner and readings from Baha'i scripture. The 22nd through the 30th, which we're in right now, is Navaratri, meaning 9 nights, and it's a Hindu festival celebrating the divine feminine. During this period, Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati are worshipped as 3 different manifestations of Shakti, or cosmic energy. From the 22nd all the way till the 20th of next month is Ramadan. And during the month of Ramadan, healthy adult Muslims are required to fast from dawn to dusk. This means abstaining from eating, drinking, gossiping, bad thoughts, bad language, and anger. I think there should be more of that. What do you all think? Ramadan is a sacred time when Muslims are also encouraged to increase other acts of worship, including offering extra prayer, studying the Quran, and giving more in charity. And finally, on the 25th will be the Annunciation, the day in the Christian religion when the angel Gabriel announced that Mary would become the mother of Jesus. So lots of different ways to celebrate March, lots of ways we have, and we will continue to be celebrating it even next month. Next up, we have some poetry on renewal and growth, and I'd like to invite Reverend Catherine Congdon to come forward and share some of this very beautiful poetry. Reverend Catherine.
Thank you. Reverend Don picked out these poems in particular based on our theme for this month. So, Journal of a Solitude, May Sarton. I think of the trees and how simply they let go, let fall the riches of a season, how without grief, it seems, they can let go and go deep into their roots for renewal and sleep. Imitate the trees, learn to lose in order to recover, and remember that nothing stays the same for long, not even pain, psychic pain. Sit it out, let it all pass. Of Ruin and Renewal by Liz Newman. We are souls of ruin and renewal, sorting through the rubble of our painful past. We are souls of ruin and renewal, waiting for the dust to settle at last. We are souls of ruin and renewal, searching for eyes that see us and walk through the debris. We are souls of ruin and renewal. We rebuild, we revive, we repurpose our own story. And finally, Alone on the Camino by Don Royce. The days may bring warmth or chill, sunshine or sleet. It matters not, for I walk alone with my thoughts. Every day I walk up and down the hills of life. The real challenge is in coming down the mountain rather than the struggle of climbing up. And then there is repose, to absorb, ruminate, and reflect, away from the distractions offered by the world. My thoughts turn to, why am I walking? What is my purpose? Is it time to sort out the habits that run my life? Maybe it is time to let go of trying to figure it out and just keep on walking, and trust the answers are walking along with my thoughts. And back to you, Bud.
Thank you, Reverend Catherine. Lovely poems, very, very deep, much to think about there. So our guest speaker for this evening, Reverend Don Kunze, was ordained as an interfaith minister in 2013 and is on the staff of All Faith Seminary International. His particular area of study is a very interesting one. It's the relationship between science and spirituality. He's a member of the Institute on Religion in the Age of Science, the International Society for Science and Religion, the Connecticut Council for Interreligious Understanding, the Foundation for Inner Peace, and the Sacred Garden Fellowship. He currently resides in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Reverend Don will be sharing his insights into this month's theme, renewal and growth. Reverend Don.
Well, welcome everyone for this evening. It's a pleasure to be able to share some of my own experiences. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Camino, but it is one of those experiences that you think about and you don't know if you're ever going to do. It began with me in 2018 in February when my son, who had just finished 18 months of riding his off-road motorbike from Connecticut down to the bottom of South America, had returned. And he said, well, Dad, you talked about the Camino. You saw that film, which was The Way with Martin Sheen and his son. And he said, well, it's a wonderful thing to try in your 76th year. So 6 weeks later, we were in Spain. It didn't take long. What is the Camino? It's a Christian pilgrimage honoring the apostle St. James, who taught in the Iberian Peninsula in the 1st century. When he finished teaching and he went back to Jerusalem and was martyred, his followers took him back to the Iberian Peninsula, and his tomb was set in the area of Santiago. It kind of disappeared for a while, wasn't kind of well known. It was rediscovered around 1814. It was at a time in which the Moors were beginning to invade Spain from the south, but a chapel and 2 churches were built over that period of time until 997, when the Moors made their further move north in Spain and conquered Santiago and destroyed the church. They took the bells and they took the doors and they moved it down to their Cordoba, which is their center for Islamic experiences in Spain. The period after that, for probably the next 2 decades, the Christian army was created under the auspices of the Pope, and they began pushing the Moors south. And so at the location of the cathedral was built beginning in 1075, and it took a couple centuries to totally complete it. But that was the point in which the relics and tomb of St. James had been identified. Until about the 10th century, there wasn't a lot of pilgrimages to the area, but it kind of began to explode a little bit when Pope Calixtus II published a travel guide. And its popularity increased for a while, and then along came the Black Plague and the Reformation, and things slowed down. But the early pilgrims traveled for purposes of reflection, devotion, and penance. Penance in particular, under the authority of the Catholic Church, was often offered to individuals who had broken the laws of the church. And they were given a choice of either going to prison or doing the pilgrimage to St. James, which became another source of opportunity. When they sent somebody, they always had to have a guard go with them to make sure they completed their mission. There are many routes to Santiago, and this is a map of the routes throughout Europe. So you had pilgrimage starting from throughout Europe, but the main point of connection with Spain was right at the bottom of the Alps, and that has become, in today's world, the primary route for the pilgrimage, the way of Santiago. One thing to note is that when you, in that period of the primary Christian pilgrimages, it became quite a significant feat to have completed it. And it was organized that badges would be given out to the individuals who had completed it. And they became quite a status symbol. And as in all economies, you find a few counterfeiters that come along, decided, oh, here's an opportunity to make money. So they started selling these badges. And the Pope then issued the edict that anyone doing so would be punished by excommunication, possibly jail time. But that didn't really stop them. So they came up with the idea of creating a written certificate that validated having completed the Camino. This is what the certificates looked like. There were two certificates. In the beginning, there was only one because it was always a Christian pilgrimage, and the Christian pilgrimage acknowledged what you were doing in terms of your purpose. But over time, particularly in modern times, the popularity of the Camino led to just a lot of people wanting to do it for other reasons. So now they issue two certificates. When you arrive in Santiago and you go to the area to present to get your certificate, you are given a choice. You are interviewed, asked if you were doing it for reasons of spirituality or it was other things like adventure or discovery. To qualify today, you have to walk at least 100 kilometers. Now, the total length of the French way is about 800 kilometers. So if you walked or went by horse, you only had to cover 100 kilometers. And if you went by bicycle, you had to do 200 kilometers. So those are the criteria to qualify. So how do they know that you actually qualified? Well, the answer is you had to have a passport. And before you begin the pilgrimage, you buy a passport. And for every village you go through, or you stop at a restaurant where you're going for your accommodations, or there are other offices, they might be tourist things, they all have these stamps. And you get them stamped in your passport. So when you arrive at the official office in Santiago, you present your passport and they can go through and see exactly what you've covered. And that goes onto your certificate. It's interesting in times, there are two events that really started increasing the popularity of the Camino. One was that when it was declared a European cultural route, and it was 1987, and it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1993. You can see that this chart below that really before that, you only had maybe a couple hundred pilgrims who actually went the distance and received their certificate. The problem was that there were a lot of people who chose not to have certificates, so the numbers were probably larger. But when it became popular, you can see that the growth has gone to the point, and this was in 2018, you had several 100,000 people doing it every year. Now the green bars are what are known as the Holi years or the Jubilee years. And those are the years when July 25th falls on a Sunday, and it's the celebration of St. James, the patron saint of Spain. It's interesting that the year 2020 was to be a Jubilee year or Holy year, but COVID hit, and you can see that the number of people traveling had dropped dramatically. So the Pope declared that 2021 would then be also a Holy year. So the numbers picked up. So the suggestion always is, you really don't want to go and do this on a Holy year because it's very crowded. So this is where the Camino begins in the French way. And it's at Saint Jean Pied de Port, which is at the bottom of the Pyrenees in the eastern part of Spain. This is the French way. Just to give you another example, the Portuguese way runs along the coast, so it's a lot less exciting, but it's one of many, many routes that you can take. The one that's best supported in terms of services, of course, has been the French way. This gives you an idea of what the elevation of the Camino is like. We can start over here on the, you can see on the far right, this is where France is. And immediately there is a very sharp mountain climb. And that is represented by the first day here. And you have approximately an 18-mile climb up the mountain. You go up from about, maybe 1,000 feet to 5,000 feet. And it's pretty exhausting, depending upon what the weather is as well. At the top, there is a couple places to stay that night. And the largest place probably has room for, I don't know, 50 or 60 people in one big room. And after a hard day of climbing, you want a good sleep. The question is, can you withstand the loud snoring that permeates the whole room? And these are some of the adaptations one learns about walking the Camino. Things that you would plan to think, oh, this might be great. Things happen, such as the woman who, while climbing up here, it was a very heavy rain and her boots got soaked. So she took them off the next day, put them in the sun to dry up, and then they shrunk so much her feet wouldn't fit in anymore. So you have to be able to adapt to what the nature gives you. Now, at the very first slide we had, which identified a very open flat plain. This is this area up here called the Meseta. It's about 2,500 feet, and it can be extremely hot during the course of the summer months. The best months for traveling, from my point of view, are the two seasons, spring and fall. But most people have vacations in the summer, so that tends to be the crowded part. So you don't get lost. There are a lot of symbols, particularly on the French way. And the official symbol of the Camino is the scallop shell. All these lines are pointing basically to ending up in Santiago. This is the example of the modern version of it. And you will see these everywhere, such as on this monument, always pointing away, although the arrow is showing the wrong direction. They got it. It should be heading that way. But you'll see the yellow arrow and the scallop are the symbols of direction. And you can see where they're all over the place. If you're in the cities, they'll put them on the walls. They'll also put them on the sidewalks. If you're on the bicycle version, you'll see the bicycle in yellow on the road. So this is, and here's another example of a yellow marker wherever there's a stone. Or so you get a lot of, it's hard to get lost, but it is possible. So this is the day. This is, I'll run you now through what it is like for morning to evening. Okay, you start up very early in the morning. This time of year, sometimes it was below freezing, and you start walking right away. And after about an hour, hour and a half, it's time to have a little breakfast, and you find a cafeteria, or it's more likely just a cafe or even a bar. And you have your breakfast, and then you continue walking, and you walk for about anywhere from 6 to 7 hours a day. So most of the time you walk, you're on your own. You might be walking with people, but it's fairly silent. So this is the time you have with yourself. This is where your mind is turning over. And when you get to your point of accommodations for the next day, it's usually around 12 or 1, and you want to get there early enough, particularly in high season, in order to get accommodations because they can fill up. So you have your lunch, and you can rest in the afternoon. You can read, meditate. You can tour the city if it's a large city, or if it's a town, look at the area. And then you carry on until it's time for dinner, which is the pilgrim dinner. And the pilgrim dinner I'll describe in a second, but it's pretty standard throughout the Camino. So where do you stay? Well, the standard way of staying that represents the early centuries was the alberge, which is like a hostel. It tends to be common rooms with bunks or mattresses open. There might be for 30 people, one bathroom. So these are challenges that you have to adapt to. So these two are example are alberge, but this is what my son chose. I tend to choose little hotels. And hotels had your own private bath. You didn't have to worry about the snoring. But this is kind of honoring the age of the 76 years. This was actually an old monastery. It wasn't a monastery, but it was an old home that was off the course of the Camino. And they would, when you got there and you called up, and they'd pick you up in a car and bring you out there for the night, and then they'd take you back to the Camino. So there are a lot of variation in kind of experiences you could have. One of the more interesting ones was this monastery. It was a small monastery that was in disrepair, and a group of Catholic association from Italy bought it, and they fixed it up to make it into an auberge. And they have, as you can see, the dinner table. But before dinner, as a custom they had here, is they had the washing of your feet, right out of the biblical context, prayers, and then they served a great Italian feast. It was not easy to lose weight on this. This is a typical pilgrim menu. Cost about €9, which today's dollar is probably $9, but probably inflation, it's a little higher, but it's a 3-course. You can see that the first course, you got lots of choices. Second course, you got lots of choices, some of the standards. And you get a dessert, plus you get all the bread and wine and water you want. And if you did not have that a meal at the auberge where you were staying, and many did not. Auberge in towns tended to not have this because there were restaurants, but every restaurant had a pilgrim's menu. So when I was mentioning after an hour walking in the morning and having breakfast, these little cafes became very popular. I love the machine they had where you throw a whole bunch of oranges fully peeled in, and the machine would peel it, squeeze the oranges. You could have fresh orange juice every day. So my standard breakfast was an orange juice and a chocolate croissant. This is a typical salad that you would get at the Pilgrims dinner. Desserts can vary. Some of them were quite exotic. But in midday, you could stop at a pizza place, and they had community tables everywhere. So there was always an exchange of conversation with other pilgrims as you travel. The other thing that you would find is in the larger cities, there were always cathedrals. And you could spend a couple hours touring a cathedral. They represented the expression of the Catholic Church across northern Spain. But when you got to the smaller towns, there were always smaller churches or chaplains. There was always a mass going on for the evening and places for reflection. One of the more interesting travelers was a guy by the name of John of Dane Johansson. He played the cello for the Pittsburgh Philharmonic. And he decided he was going to walk the Camino and play concerts in the various cathedrals and churches along the way. And he did produce a documentary movie called Strangers on the Earth about it, which is very beautifully done. The music is really gifted to the periods and the times he walked. Another aspect of the Camino is, of course, the cross. It was a Christian symbol. And a tradition has it that when you began the Camino, you brought with you a rock or a stone representing the burdens you were carrying in life. And as you walked across the northern part of Spain, the high point was represented by this obelisk here, and you don't see it, but down below is a primary place where you left your rock or your stone. It became a ceremonial effect, but throughout there are other places you can leave your rocks, as you can see here, or stones. But and sometimes you had very exotic crosses symbolizing individuals' struggles. Now the scenery, recognizing that I was traveling in April and May, and so it was a transition from winter to spring to summer. And so the temperature varied quite a bit from below freezing to in the 70s pretty much, depending upon what elevation you're at. This is an example of various aspects of the actual walk of the Camino. It's quite varied. You can see it goes through forest, along streams in the mountains. This is a more open experience right here. This is somewhat narrow, but it was a beautiful time really to walk. And all the time, you know, your minds are experiencing the gifts of the earth as you're walking. You're experiencing the extremes. If it's there was a lot of rain as you went further east into the glacier area, because you get the basic currents that come off of the Atlantic. If you got up into the mountains, some of the paths were very narrow. You could be walking along here, and coming the other way would be a farmer with several of his cattle. So you had to be able to share the small paths. And in the early morning walks, it was often foggy. But recognizing that I chose to take the best pictures when the weather looked real nice. And you're stepping back really in history and time. A lot of these structures were built during the Roman occupation of Spain. And all the towns are obviously founded along waters because it was an essential part of supporting whatever economy you had. So there were plenty of rivers and bridges. And one of the things, as you came towards the end of a day, topped a ridge, you would see after hours of walking, you could see your destination for the evening. And that was always a relief, knowing that, okay, soon you would get to rest. And these little small mountain towns or the bigger cities. This was a bigger city. This day, when I was approaching it, we had probably a good bit of sleet. And one thing I didn't bring was gloves. And I regretted that, but you kind of survive and have to adapt. But the fun of the Camino is really the pilgrims. They come from all around the world. And in the early days, while it was predominantly a Christian pilgrimage, because of the popularity in the last 30 years with UNESCO and so forth, raising the awareness of the Camino, it has become a spot that people travel for multiple purposes. Often the purpose you have isn't what you end up with. Being caught with your thoughts for many, many days does tend to spin and gives you a chance to reflect both on what has gone before you and what is going to go ahead of you. And these are some of the examples of people and what they were here for. We'll start off here with this fellow right here. He came from South Korea. He was beginning his training to become a minister at this church in South Korea. There was a change in administration of the church. He did not like the direction it was going, so he quit. And he said, I'm going to go walk the Camino and just kind of work out where my next step in my next church is going to be. That was his purpose. This woman up here is a native Alaskan, comes from the country which we often see the brown bears in the stream, by 20 or 30 of them catching salmon. And she brings with her a lot of her Native American traditions. Leonardo from Italy, he was going through a rough time in Italy. And so he just said, I'm packing it up and I'm going to go on the Camino and kind of work things out. Happy-go-lucky guy. It's hard not to be happy on the Camino once you get started. On the left here, we have Pepe. He was a former paratrooper. And in the year 2000, he began walking the Camino and did it for four more years, at which time he said, hey, this is my home. So he packed up in Spain, bought himself this little house, somewhat larger, expanded it, and created an albergue in which he entertains visitors, pilgrimage every night, and that's become his life. On the right here is Thomas, also from Spain. He first walked the Camino when he was 49, and while walking it, he was meeting some people, and he was at a castle, and as he was sitting there waiting, he said the stones sang to him, and they called him to the Camino. So he went back to Spain. He had an equipment business, a sports equipment business. He sold it and moved to the Camino, bought himself a little outpost here, and now he's there during the day. He sells things as an outfitter to Caminos. The pilgrims, if you run out of something or need something, the big cities have really big sports stores. So you can get pretty much whatever you need. The smaller villages do not. And then there's the trinkets. Anybody who walks the Camino, of course, puts one of these scallops shells on their bag, symbolizing that they're walking the Camino. Now here's the character. He's the character of the Camino, Marcelino. He walks it every year. He's probably walked it 45 or 50 times. He's created a business out of it. He's created a personality out of it. And he has a website, and he sells goods and paintings and drawings. But you'll notice that he'll set up shop. You can talk with him. He's got his little stamp, so you give him a passport, so you can stamp your passport. He often, when he's walking the Camino, will travel with a donkey and a dog. And of course, his dress is emblazoned on the wall. This is a painting on one of the walls in the cities. Yeah. This is Carla from Italy. Carla had a very difficult life in her 20s. And she had an eye infection that was a bacteria that caused her to go blind. And she became very depressed. And in her depression, she had this dream. And in the dream, she was backpacking up in the mountains, and there were yellow arrow signs directing where she was going, and she had no idea what this was about. So she shared the dream with her parents, and they went on the internet and started Googling these facts, and up came the Camino. So she said, as soon as my eyes start to heal, I'm going to do the Camino. And she saw her eyes improving, and at the age of her, I think she was about 31, decided it's time. So my son, which is in the picture up above here, ran into her on a couple occasions, and we were in this one town and she was there. So she was a chef. So she and my son went to the supermarket, bought some stuff, and made this fantastic dinner. That was our pilgrim dinner that day. On the right here, we have a woman. Her name was Laura. She was from Germany. She had just graduated from medical school, didn't know where she wanted to settle and begin her practice. So she decided, I have time, I'm going to do the Camino and try to figure it out. This is Daniel from Germany also. Now, Daniel heard about the Camino by reading a book on it by a German author. And he decided that he was going to definitely do the Camino. So the author was named Kurtling, and he was a comedian, he was an entertainer, and decided that at this point in his life, he was trying to figure out what he really wanted to go ahead and do. So he went on the Camino, and they produced a book that became a bestseller. As a comedian, they also did a film about it. And the film is called I'm Off Then. And it is hilarious. I've seen part of it. Okay. This is Sarah from South Africa. She wanted to do the Camino, but could never get her company to give her 6 weeks off. But she just was very persistent. And eventually they just folded and said, go take your 6 weeks. So there's a lesson in that. There's that persistence. There's probably nobody who has walked the Camino who thought along the way, why am I doing this? I'm just going to quit. But once you get on it, it's very difficult to stop because you're in the middle of nowhere. So you keep going on, and as you get closer, you say, I've gone this far, I'll go further. Steve is from the UK. He was retired. His wife did not want to walk it, but she was going to meet him in Santiago, and they're going to tour Portugal. This guy is from Canada. His name is Ian. Ian was a very well-traveled person. He was an investment advisor, spoke multiple languages, and when he heard about it, he was off and running. So I have to do that one as well. These two women had signed a contract to teach English in South Korea, and they just finished their contract. We're heading back to the United States. And they said, okay, let's do this. Let's see where it takes us. You can see that there's just a lot of animals on the Camino here. This woman up here decided she was going to do the Camino all on her own. And in doing so, she planned nothing. She wanted the experience of being totally surprised, and it didn't take her long to figure out as she started that she brought way too much stuff. And she had to sort of jettison as she went along. You don't want your burden to be too heavy. This fellow right here is from Australia, and he is, his name is Roger, and Roger was an engineer. One of the things that he and I had in common, since we were both engineers at one point, was that we were slow walkers, and he's probably the only guy I passed on the whole Camino in terms of walking, but we'd walk together for periods of time, and he would skip sometimes breakfast so he could continue walking and not get left too far behind. Okay. These nests up here were seen throughout, and a lot of bell towers. It was the nest of the storks. This strange character right here is me. Okay. I mentioned that you could bicycle the Camino. This was a group of Chinese who decided as a group they would bicycle. They were posting on the internet every day their stories and experiences. When you got into towns, bigger towns, you had spontaneous dancing and events that were taking place with the various pilgrims that had come into the town. I had mentioned before that some of the passages in the country were quite narrow. So all these sheep are waiting because we're at the other end and we're blocking their route. So the minute we stepped aside, they went into full gallop for sheep and passed through. there was a very interesting story that came out here. We had just passed through a vineyard, and there was a gentleman there who came from Long Island. And I had heard the story, but I had not met him. And his story was that he decided he always wanted to do this. He was retired and he was walking it. And while he was retiring it, his daughter found out she was pregnant and was going to have a boy. So she said, how do I tell him this? Because he's on the Camino. But since he was posting his activities every day, she got on a plane, flew to Spain, found out where he was going to be, got ahead of him. And when he walked by, popped out of the bushes and says, Pops, you're going to have a grandson. And that story was all over the Camino. Obviously, rest and contemplation. This is an old Roman well, gives you a sense of the history that expanded. And there was a lot of art along the Camino. This was cut out metal disc portraying one of the early pilgrimages done in the Middle Ages. The guy down here was an artist, and he set up a shop. This is his artist shop. Even the trees are very artistic. And of course, in the towns, you had a lot of monuments dedicated to the Camino. So all this distance, and you eventually arrive here at Santiago. Santiago de Compostela. Compostela is the word for your certificate. And the main thing with arriving here is celebrations. People are celebrating the big square. There are groups that are burning their boots. There are other groups that are holding their bicycles over their head. Their friends are meeting them there that haven't seen them for weeks. So it's a big active square. But the end of the Camino is primarily a spiritual journey, and at the cathedral, they will have the Pilgrim Mass. In the peak season with a lot of travelers, they'll have as many as 3 a day, otherwise 2 or 1 a day. Now I'm going to come back to this because while this is the end point, traditionally there is another week to the Camino. And that week takes you out of Finisterre. And to follow it is, this is Santiago, and this is the walk out to the Finisterre, which means lands in. And it's a point of rest, reflection. You've just completed a very arduous period of time. You've been with your thoughts probably a good third of the time, and you're digesting it. And like in any great experience, you're saying, okay, I'm going to have to re-assimilate into civilization. But what are you taking from it? Well, this is where the work really begins. And I pulled out a few quotes that begin to reflect some of the experiences that I had. First one is the first step towards getting somewhere is to decide that you are not going to stay where you are. That becomes a commitment. That's J. Pierpont Morgan. You must learn a new way to think before you can master a new way to be. Marianne Williamson, Thoughts from A Course in Miracles. Joseph Campbell's is a particularly popular one with myself here. We must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. The old skin must be shed before the new one can come. We must always change anew, renew ourselves, otherwise we harden. Johann Wolfgang van Goethe. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Lao Tzu. Now, you notice the last one is from Rabbi Joseph Gelberman. It was interesting. Today was the 23rd. And on the 23rd, I got out his little blue book. And I looked up the 23rd, and the 23rd happened to be my main theme. My main theme was, you can do all the planning you want, but what will happen along the way is things don't work out the way you want them to work out. At which point you have a choice. You can be frustrated or battle it or try again. Or you can say, maybe the universe has a better option for me. So it's learning to let go. And today's theme was let's let go. So to let go is to allow to get the personal self with its companion of fear and futility completely out of the way of the universal aura. So I would say it was an arduous journey. By the time I got to the cathedral, I was pretty much dragging. I found that I had a problem of a bone in a foot that I never realized all my life. And after about 2 weeks, it became very prominent. I almost wanted to cut a hole in my shoe to relieve it, or I would use, flip-flops or open toe shoes to walk to rest it. But it never bothered me my whole life. It's only when I got very, very deep into it that it became a very symbolic part of the pain we carry within ourselves and a way to letting go of that. So this is back to the Pilgrim Mass. I'm going to ask each of you now to kind of relax. I'm going to play you some music from the Mass. Let the music sing to you and fill you with a gift of your own completion and your own renewal. You can close your eyes or leave it open, but I leave you with this final sound of the Camino. Well, thank you, and back to you, Reverend Bud.
Thank you, Don. Wow, what a journey you just took us on. That is absolutely amazing. That was really something quite special. I'm sure people must have questions for you. I have a couple questions for you. Are you open to answering some
Sure,
questions?
sure.
So, what did you feel was the highlight of your experience?
The highlight was the Pilgrim Mass.
Ah,
It was a very mystical experience. After weeks of being on the road and struggling in different kinds of weather and having the physical challenges that take place, and you finally get there. You didn't give up, you get there and you step in, and it's just the energy of the Mass was just, it's one of those things you can't describe. You know, that was really, really the highlight.
wow, very cool. Anyone else want to ask Don a question?
Yeah, Reverend Don, that excerpt musically, was that in Santiago de Compostela at the end of the journey?
Yes.
Yeah, that was that the singing was very interesting because she was singing in Gallego. You're in Galicia there, but that's
Right.
not Castellano. She was actually singing Gallego, which is much more Portuguese than it is Castellano.
Well, that is the glacious area of Spain. And the local people do speak the dialect.
Yeah.
But everybody speaks Spanish.
Right. I first heard it in 1971 when I was on a young student studying over in Spain, and I got on a train that was going through Galicia, and I heard Gallego spoken for the first time, and I thought, oh my goodness gracious, this is not Castellano. This is like 75% Portuguese with a little bit of Spanish stuck here and there.
You
Yeah.
have a very good ear.
Yeah,
It was my first language. Portuguese was my first language here on the planet.
Yeah.
So I think I might recognize it anywhere.
Mm.
I think Corinne has a question. Corinne?
Hi, good evening. I was in El Camino, the French Camino, in 2018 to the end of April, beginning of May. We arrived the May 1st. It was a Monday to Santiago, you know. And yes, most beautiful experience. I highly recommend it. I mean, then there was the pandemic, and I've been meaning to come back because I want to do the Portuguese Camino, which is beautiful through the beach, you know. So you go way through the north to Santiago de Compostela. And I agree that the highlight is when you get to the cathedral, you know. Yeah, I just stayed there like 6 hours. Yeah. I mean, the energy that you feel, I can feel it right now, you know, the energy, everything, you know. And I'm Venezuelan American, so I decided to stay there praying for Venezuela for 6 hours. Yes, it's a most beautiful experience.
Yeah. Well, as I say, the experiences are difficult to explain. You almost have to experience it to know what it is.
Exactly. And thank you very much. Beautiful presentation.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah. One of the intention is to get people excited about going.
Exactly. Thank you.
And Dr. Kripal, you have something you'd like to share?
Yes, sir. Reverend Kun, you did a marvelous job of showing this pilgrimage to Camino. It reminds me about some of the old traditional things in India which we have, which the temples are built on the mountain tops or far away as you go through the tortuous process of reaching those places. You know, the whole idea is to purify you and make you think, and all that process as you go through it. By the time you reach the pinnacle, you seem yourself relaxed, relieved, and in a mystical way, in contact with the creator or whatever the situation person may believe in. So I think that's what going through my head when I was watching you, so many people from all over the world coming together and visiting the place. Thank you for sharing it.
Well, thank you. I think there's the aspect that people go for different reasons and they don't necessarily know why they're going. And sometimes they have a reason, it's never the reason they go. And then at the conclusion of it, they're then faced with, how do I carry this momentum into the world and what I'm to do next? But it's not common that people have that much amount of time to think about all this. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone who had questions and comments, and we'll go ahead and move forward through the rest of our service. So now I'd like to invite Reverend Natalia to come forward and share with all of us the New Light Temple blessing. Reverend Natalia.
Thank you, Reverend Bud. Our universal blessing. The divine bestows these blessings on us all. Miraculous love and providence, comfort, hope, and healing, understanding hearts, resistance to temptation, freedom from egoism, equal vision, faith, devotion, and wisdom, spiritual progress and inner strength, virtuous hearts, compassion for the less fortunate, and love for all.
Beautiful.
May these blessings of the divine rest upon us. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May we lift the veil and see the divine spark in all of them. Peace, shalom, salam, shanti.
Thank you, Reverend Natalia. So now we have our experiential sharing segment, which we have a few minutes for, but we'd love to get folks' thoughts on this. What has been your experience of spiritual renewal and growth? Clearly, walking the Camino creates a great deal of opportunities for growth and progress. And clearly, the reflection afterwards would be potentially much renewal, much spiritual renewal. Does anyone have any insights? Don, you obviously shared a great deal of your spiritual renewal and growth as a result of your experience.
Yeah, I would say it's an opportunity to dig deep in yourself. It's like in the Course in Miracles, you have this tendency to want to throw away the course because it's challenging you in ways that you may not want to or not ready to be challenged, but you persevere and you keep going. And it's at the end where you get a sense that the world, you're away from the world. You don't know what's happening in the world. You aren't in contact with any radio or TV or anything.
What, you don't have cell signal?
Well, we do have cell phones, but we don't use them except to make reservations if necessary. Yeah, don't want to use up all the data,
Got it.
Yeah, yeah. But it is being away from the world that the distractions that come upon you disappear. And then you're left with yourself. And whether you take that forward and are in a state of renewal and growth, or as it said if you don't, you harden and you get stuck.
Mm.
And it becomes your choice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. Yeah, Reverend Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic to be able to do something like that for that many weeks. I don't know if I could do it. It was like 18 miles in a day. I think 5 might be my limit. But, you know, but the same concept of taking time out, you know, when I've gone on a retreat, maybe for a weekend or take time during a day, it's true. You go through this process, or maybe doing some kind of prayer practice for X number of days. And that it's true at the end, you know, then it's time to reflect and see what, you know, what change has happened. I know there were times when, you know, every day I was doing different things. And, you know, there's so many ways of achieving spiritual renewal and growth. You know, every religion has its rituals, and but I'm really intrigued with this Camino now. So I don't know how what kind of boots you need or whatever. I understand the washing the feet, but that was really beautiful, Don, and you know, it's making me think about making sure to have those spaces in my life where I can, you know, have my thoughts and focus and commune with God. So thanks.
Anyone else?
I'd like to share briefly. Oh, please go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dr. Cabal.
I want to share with you that in India, I came from a, relatively speaking, compared to here, from a poor family. My parents paid for all my medical education. So in 1960, when I was in the medical school, you know, it took a long time to go home on the weekends, or only time I could go was like spring breaks and things like that. And the coursework was quite difficult, you know, especially the first 2 years when you study anatomy, physiology, basic sciences, and it's kind of learning a new language. So I will get a little bit, you know, anxious and depressed. And I also knew that it was so hard. My parents were working to pay for my education. So I would get worried whether I'll pass through the exam or not. So 5 miles away was the Golden Temple from me. I used to walk that every 2 weeks over there, and in the process do some thinking and go over there and go through the process of while walking. And over there, the steps go down like this, making you humble. And then you go around, take a shower, and go around and go inside, pay your prayers and listen to the kirtan over there. And then come back, and occasionally you met into some folks from your own place who were visiting that place and all that. And I used to stay overnight in the precincts of the Golden Temple, and next day after taking a langar, I will go back. But that used to be my way of renewing myself, my way of re-energizing myself, reassuring that some divine power will intervene for me to help me through the tough education, and I won't run out of funds, and my parents won't be disappointed as I go through the education. Just an idea I thought I'd share with you. Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. I understand that. But what you're pointing out is that any of us can do that. We can create that space, just like Catherine said, where we dedicate this time to our spiritual focus so we can renew and obviously grow our hearts as a result. So thank you for that, Dr. Kripal. Appreciate that. Reverend Larry, did you want to make a comment or share?
Yeah. First, an overall comment about the Camino. The length of it
rather than doing any one particular thing for that length of time in walking, it definitely reminds me of doing a retreat, an extended retreat for maybe a month at a time. In the 80s, I did extended stays in ashrams. And there is that period of transition where you're into the regular routine and you do the prayers and the schedule, and then there is a transition coming back out into the world. And Don talked about that, reorienting yourself to society in a way. But the other thing, that the whole concept of renewal and doing something that you feel is the right thing to do, even if you're not quite sure why yet, but you feel it. It reminded me of one of my poems that I wrote back in 2011, which, when I think about it, was my seminary year when I was becoming a minister. And I wrote this March 11th, 2011 is the date I have on it. And I just called it a prayer poem. And I'm not sure exactly what the dark period was that I felt I was coming out of when I started this, but this is how it goes. So where you been, Larry? I've been through a mini dark night of the soul. Are you back yet? I don't know. I still don't feel quite whole. Something's missing and something's changed. Something's opened and some things rearranged. There's a real need to rely on faith and on trust, and perceiving that behind doubt and fear, there's a must. But what it is that must come, I do not quite know. I surrender my heart in a prayer, let it show, and illumine my mind and refresh my weary bod, because whatever it is, I know it's coming from God. If I can only stay empty, I'll feel what is next, giving up trying and straining, perplexed. Having opened my soul as best as I'm able, may wisdom and assurance settle in and be stable. It will come from inside me. The wellspring runs deep in the seat of my soul, in divinity's keep. The true self, the knower, the I am inside, that my foolish mind seems to forget and to hide. If I ever get tired of playing this game, I'll be wise beyond measure and reflect the same. I'll see the same beauty in each one of you, and get out of my own way and let the love through. In the meantime, I'm tired, tripping over my laces, not always recognizing the divine in all faces. There's still something left, something not quite outgrown, that can't see it in your face or even my own. But whenever it shines through, I steadfastly pray, may I just remember not to get in its way, and surrender enough so it will finally stay. May it hold you and keep you and lighten your way.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Very appropriate for tonight. Very lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think with that, we'll go ahead and move forward. A great transition for us. So we'll go through our announcements pretty quickly, and then we'll wrap it up and call it a night. And it's been an amazing experience. As you know, we have different themes each month. These are all of our themes for the year. As you can see, we are right here at Renewal and Growth, and these are the upcoming events. If any of these speak to you, please let us know. We'd love to have you participate and share, even if it's just to share a poem or an insight. We would love to have you participate. And if one of these really speak to you and you would like to be our guest speaker, we'd love to have you there. All of our speakers are focused on an interfaith perspective, and we like to continue to share that. Next month, we will have the Golden Rule, and we will have Reverend Rachel Bruton Hazel as our guest speaker. And she will be sharing her insights into this must understand rule of human behavior as depicted in every belief system and every great philosophy, the Golden Rule. Dr. John continues to have his classes. This spring, he's focusing on living a miracle-minded life. And as always, John's focus around A Course in Miracles is very deep and very, very powerful. We have a Sunday with Monday coming up, actually this weekend on Sunday, with Marie Philippe. And she is the author of a book called Live Your Happy. She is a longtime Course in Miracles student and teacher, and the engagement is going to be very high energy and very, very fun. And you can actually go to her website, mariaphilippe.org, and find out more about her and sign up to attend at miraclesmagazine.org. We did this a number of years ago, 1920, when the first time that we all got sent home and had an Easter service, which was absolutely amazing. And we're going to have another Easter service. So the One Mind Foundation is presenting a very special event entitled Resurrection, Reawakening, and Rebirth, and it's free. We have some powerful speakers, including and music from Dr. John, Reverend Patricia Pierce, Dove Fishman, Dr. Rod Shelberg, yours truly. And you can join by registering at miraclesmagazine.org. And I will be posting all these links in chat as well. And it should be a wonderful opportunity for us to take a look at this very high holy holiday. Reverend Dr. Keith offers his ongoing Kriya Yoga meditation classes. This next one's starting in April. Dr. Keith just came out here to Reno, as a matter of fact, last week, and taught 2 different 4-hour classes on Kriya, and it was an amazing experience. He is a terrific teacher, and in the lineage, as defined in Autobiography of a Yoga by Paramahansa Yogananda, an amazing individual. And if you don't know Keith, you really want to. You can find his website, kriyabreath.com, and email him at keith@kriyabreath.com. Every Friday, I'm on Reverend Arif Husik, along with the Common Word Alliance and the Ministry and Spirituality Healing Centers for Humanity, invite you to an event that is a healing prayer for humanity, 3 o'clock Eastern every Friday. You've done this over 100 times, and it's a wonderful interfaith gathering focused on our collective healing. The Inner Wisdom Circle is offered by AFSI graduate Reverend Wita Joy, and is a deep meditative process that allows us to tap into our inner wisdom, our divine essence, for guidance and insights. All are welcome. No experience is required. And they will be meeting on the 26th at 10 Pacific, 1 Eastern, just after our wonderful event with Dr. John. As we previously mentioned, New Light Temple is the ordaining body for All Faith Seminary National, and we offer brilliant interfaith programs that encourage you to go deeper into your own faith while exploring all the beautiful mystical aspects of the world's religions. We start new classes every year in September, and you can find out more about it from the link in chat, and that's also allfaithseminary.org. And I'll post all these links right now. If you've got any events that you would like to share, please let us know. You can send an email to us at thenewlighttemple@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to include your events as well. And with that, we'd like to say thank you, Reverend Don, for sharing your very, very interesting insights and wonderful opportunities for growth and renewal. And may you all go forward in great blessing and abundance on your own spiritual path. Namaste.
Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya.